Hey, this is Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. I want to show you a very simple EQ technique that a lot of you probably already know, but if you don't, it's so simple, but it's so powerful. And I'm going to show a little twist on the technique that can make it even more effective for you. So here's an acoustic guitar track that I recorded fairly recently. Good sounding track. It's not too boomy. It's got a little bit of excessive low end down there that we can take care of with EQ. But this is going to be in kind of a rock mix. So it's very full. For an acoustic song, it might work. But if we need to kind of get rid of some of that thickness for the mix, we're going to need EQ. So here is the big tip. You've probably seen this before where you pull up an EQ and you know you want to EQ something, you're not exactly sure what to do. So the recommendation is to boost and sweep around. Now, I subscribe to that recommendation too, but there's a big problem with that, and that's the kind of twist I want to talk about today. If you take this EQ and you boost anywhere, no matter where you boost, if you're not careful, you're going to think that's the problem frequency. That's an easy trap to fall into, and I fall into it too. It's not something just for if you've never used an EQ in your life. Even if you've used one for years, you can still fall into this trap. And the trap is simply that you don't give it enough of a sweep to really find the problematic frequency, and you end up cutting and boosting things that don't really need to be cut or boosted. So here, just take a listen. Let's just randomly, let's say this EQ is at 500 hertz. Let's hit play and just do a boost there. Okay, that sounds bad, right? It's easy to do that boost and say, oh, well, aren't we lucky 500 hertz is the frequency that sounds bad? That's actually not the case. Because if you do that at any frequency, it sounds bad. Let's try something at 2K. Okay, it sounds like there's a ringing there. Oh no, what are we gonna do? How about 5K? Oh no, that's too harsh, and we need to cut that as well. So you can see how you can do this at every frequency. 200. Oh goodness, that's too much. 100. Oh, that's too loud. How about down to 50? There's even some boominess down there. What are we going to do? We have to cut every single frequency in the spectrum. See, that's the problem with boosting and sweeping. A lot of times we don't let ourselves sweep enough to really find the problem. So we're going to try it again with this 500 hertz, but now we're going to actually sweep, and we're going to compare what we hear. We're going to go until it sounds really bad, the frequency we're probably trying to cut, and we're going to continue past that to make sure we're going for the right frequency, because frequencies are tricky. They're all interrelated. So if you have a problem at 200 hertz, chances are there's a resonant problem an octave above that at 400 hertz and then at 800 hertz. So if you have a ringing in a snare drum at 150 hertz, you'll also hear a harmonic of that ringing at 300 and 600 and 1200, I forget how the math works, but you get what I'm saying. There are multiples of that frequency that also have issues. So you may end up cutting a multiple when you really need to get down and cut the fundamental. Okay, now not to get all math and physics on you, but that's kind of the underlying thought behind it. We find one frequency we cut, we think it's the right one, but we're not entirely sure. Now, just by sweeping around, you may still not know, but a good rule of thumb is if you were listening to the guitar and you thought, okay, it's a little too thick in the kind of the low mids, that kind of muddy region, then you kind of know what area you're listening for. So when you boost, cut until you find the part that you heard that sounds really bad, you find that at the loudest point. It's generally the thing that sounds the worst when you're sweeping across the frequencies. Generally, not always. So let me just do an example and show you and stop talking. Okay, here we go. Okay, right out of the bat, that sounds like a frequency I want to cut. It seems like it's standing out above everybody else. Let's not cut yet. Let's keep sweeping. Okay, that stands out a lot more, right? Let's keep going. So an interesting thing happened. This is just playing a simple, I think it's an A or a D chord, which is a really simple deal. And we're hearing different octaves of that same note. Listen again. Boom, boom, boom. There's another note there. So the three notes that stood out are the three notes that I'm playing on the guitar. So there's really, you can't use those as your reference for what to cut, because each of those stood out a lot because those frequencies are being played. That's why EQ can be so tricky sometimes. So what we're going to do is find more generally, instead of listening to notes, where does kind of that thickness stand out? So let's turn the EQ off and listen for a second and then go find it. So it's more of a fum, fum, fum kind of sound, which tells me it's probably lower than up here at 200 hertz. So let's go find it again. So lo and behold, it looks like the frequency was actually right at 100 hertz. There was some at 150 that sounded interesting, but the 100 hertz was really that fum, fum, fum kind of sound that I was hearing before. So what happens when we cut that? Sounds a little bit better. It doesn't quite hit you in that kind of low, mid, fum, fum as much by cutting that 3 dB. Now, in addition to that, we could do a high-pass filter too, which is probably what I would have done off the bat, but I wanted to show you this EQ deal. I didn't think it would be this low, honestly. Just goes to show you, you have to sweep around and go lower than you think you need to go and go higher than you think you need to go to really find the right frequency. So for this particular sound, I think it sounds a lot better with a 3 dB cut at 108 hertz. And we may do more, we may do less, but that's a good starting point to get this fitting into that mix a little bit better. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Sweep around and just be sure you don't just cut the first thing you hear that sounds bad. You might be missing out on some really good EQ moves that could really take your mixes to the next level. Thanks again for watching. I'm Joe from HomeStudioCorner.com. If you haven't signed up to the daily newsletter, check it out. There's some free stuff you get when you sign up. It's worth checking out over at HomeStudioCorner.com. Thanks. See you next week.